Walking back into a place you already left is one of the most honest things a person will ever have to do. And not honest in a noble way, honest in a way that strips you bare. Because you already had the goodbye, you already had the moment where people said, good luck, where you cleaned out your little corner that was yours, where you walked to your car and you felt like you finally done it, you escaped, you leveled up, you're on to something better. And now you're pulling into the same parking lot, same building, same door, same everything. And I worked at this job for years, not months, but I worked for years, and I was good at it. But I was done with it, man. I just completely done with it. And the way you're done with something when your body still shows up, but your mind has left many months ago, you know, an opportunity came to go somewhere else, and I took it, and I didn't hesitate. And it felt like progress. That felt like the move that I was supposed to make. And then I got let go. Um, in that sentence, it sounds simple until it happens to you. Got let go. Three words. But what lives inside those three words is a silence that follows you home and sits in every room of your house. And you don't know what to do with your hands. You don't know what to do with your mornings. The structure you built your days around just completely vanished, and nobody warned you about how much that messes with your head. And so I took several months to just I took probably around 5 6 months to just clear my head, try to figure out what my next move is going to be. um, and on the outside, it sounds healthy, taking time for yourself, resetting, all of that. But there's a version of taking time off that nobody talks about, which is watching your bank account slowly drain while the world keeps moving on and you're standing still. There's a version of you doing everything right, eating clean, working out, keeping your mind sharp, and you still feel like you're losing. Because the scoreboard doesn't care about self improvement. The scoreboard is bills, groceries, food, all of that costing more than they did a year ago. It's that number in your bank account that gets smaller every week because it doesn't care about how many books you read or self improvement shit. Um, and so the unemployment checks stopped. And when those dry up, a clock really starts ticking. And it's not metaphorical, it's real. It's just math. And math, it does not negotiate. So I made the call, went back, and here's the part that eats at me. It's not really just the job itself. The work is fine. It was always fine, and that's not the problem. The problem is what walking back through that door says about the story I was telling myself. Because when I left, I had a narrative. I was the guy who outgrew this place. I was moving forward. I was building something, and now I'm back. And the story just fell apart, and I have to clock in anyways. Um, and the people there look at me the same way, and that's what gets me. They don't see the version of me that left and tried to do something and got knocked down and spent several months rebuilding mentally. They just see the guy who returned, and that's it. Same position, same role. The difference only exists inside of me, and there's no way to explain it. And it doesn't, and there's no, there's no way to explain it where it doesn't sound like an excuse. And meanwhile, I'm looking around and everyone everyone's just on autopilot, same routines, same conversations, same lunch spot. Nothing shifted while I was gone. The building didn't evolve, the work didn't move, the energy didn't budge, but I changed. And that gap between who I've become and where I am, or where I physically am every day, that's where the suffering lives. And I see people online, I see people I went to school with, launching things, getting promoted, building, and I'm planted in the same spot I was standing in 2 years ago, except now with the added weight of knowing I tried to leave and it didn't work. And that comparison, it's drowning. Um, some mornings it had me underwater before I even got out of bed. Uh, and I'm not gonna stand here and pretend it doesn't sting, because it does sting. But there's a moment at the start of just each day where I pull into that lot and something in my chest just tightens, because my body remembers leaving. My body remembers thinking that I was done with this, and now I have to override that feeling when I walk in and just do the work anyways. And that's not a failure loop. It's just the discipline in the ugliest kind. Nobody posts this version of the grind. Nobody makes content about returning to the place you outgrew because you ran out of money. The internet only shows the leap. It never shows the guy who leaped, landed wrong, and had to walk back to the edge that he had jumped from. Um, but what I've realized is that that guy is more dangerous than the one who never jumped at all. He knows something now. He knows what it costs. He knows what's out there. He knows exactly what he's walking back into, and he's doing it with his eyes wide open. And the hardest part isn't being back. The hardest part is being back and knowing I don't belong there anymore, and clocking in anyways because the next move isn't ready yet. And I'm not I'm not the type to let someone else cover my life while I wait.